Good afternoon, welcome back. It is Tuesday, November 7th, 2023. Finished our first full week of November here, 7 days in. We got a few more weeks left, then we'll be in that final month, and we'll be wrapping up this birthdays and events series that has been pretty successful. We don't have the viewership, but that's part of it. It's just getting the word out there, having folks finding it, learning about it if they want to take a few minutes of their day and see some different cards and different drivers and talk about some different events. That's what we're going to do here. So we're going to start in 1993 in the street course of Adelaide, Australia for the Formula One race. Ayrton Senna would get what would be his final career win. Of course, he would drive for Williams in 94 and have that tragic accident in Italy that would take his life. But on this day, 30 years ago, Ayrton Senna wins his final F1 race. Also on this date, 30 years ago, Johnny Rumley wins his first ever Busch race at Hickory Motor Speedway, driving, I believe it was a cell phone car. It was a 00 car sponsored by Big Dog Cole. And a lot of people thought, okay, he's going to get his big break now. Things are really going to happen. And his phone really didn't get ringing. But Johnny was a pretty well-known short track ace in the Carolina area, but he would eventually get a ride with Don Beverly's team and would get his second win at Dover a few years later. Fast forward all the way to 2020, at Phoenix in the Xfinity Series race, Austin Cindric wins and bookends the season with a win at Daytona and a win at Phoenix to win his first ever Xfinity Series championship. He would, of course, move up to Cup a couple years later and win the Daytona 500. 2021, on this date, in the Cup race at Phoenix, Kyle Larson wins and also clinches his first Cup Series championship. So we're going to talk about a few birthdays here. We got a few of them with cards. We're going to start with one that does not have cards. Born on this day in 1945. Maybe he's got cards, but I don't have any. At least I've never seen any. Born on this day in 1945. He only ran 5 Cup Series races, but he has started in 1979 as part of the rookie class with Dale Earnhardt, Terry Labonte, Harry Gant, Joe Milliken, and all those folks. Dave Watson. But his story is a sad one where he was leading the race at Atlanta, came in for a pit stop, and something happened. The rear end tires locked up, and he spun into his pits and hit one of his crewmen, and sadly that crewman lost his life. Dennis Wade was the crewman's name. But Dave Watson was in the lead in the final lap of competition that he ever drove, and he would never race in the Cup Series ever again. Even though he could have had a very promising career, he just said, nope, we're not going to do it anymore. So born on this day in 1941, but sadly she passed away in 2015, and her life had a lot of tragedies as she shared with her husband. Lost 2 sons, one to a racing accident, one to a helicopter crash. Almost lost her husband to a racing crash. You should know by now we're talking about Mrs. Judy Allison there. So this is from 1988 in the Busch race at Daytona. The Goodies 300. Now, they did get a divorce, and then they remarried a few years later. I think Adam Petty's crash is what brought them back together. But sad that all that Allison family had a lot of tragedies to go through. Our next birthday, born on this day in 1930. Sadly, he passed away in 2009. He was probably the journeyman of journeyman drivers. It'd be Mr. Dick May. Many of you may have never heard of him, but he ran his own cars for many years. And there's set to what I believe the record 5 different cars in 75 as a relief driver. And then there's one of the cars that he raced. And a little bit about him. And there's been a few interviews with him. If you go into the MRN Classic races on your podcast app and go to a few of the races from the late 70s, early 80s that he's in, and he drops out of a couple races, they do have interviews with him, so it kind of gives you an idea of his character and personality. Seemed like a pretty fun guy, that a person, you know, he seemed like he was really jovial and full of energy. Our final birthday, born on this day in 1970. I believe he's a spotter in the Cup Series. Don't ask me for who right now, because I know he's worked for a few different drivers. But he did have a brief run in the Cup Series around 2000, 2001. He also raced a few years in the Truck Series. Briefly had a cup of coffee in the Xfinity Series as well. But just always seemed to be riddled with bad luck. He is in the Earnhardt family by marriage through his, see here, that'd be his uncle, I believe. Anyway, you know who I'm talking about here. Mr. Andy Houston. Andy's father, of course, is Tommy Houston. Tommy's brother, Hal Houston's daughter, is Teresa Houston, who married Dale Earnhardt. So I believe by marriage, he is Dale's cousin. Am I getting that right? Yeah. So by marriage, Andy Houston would be Dale's cousin. So he drove that Addington truck, the number 60 truck, had some good runs in it. Cal Wells noticed him, said, hey, we're going to put you in the McDonald's car. For whatever reason, that car ran horrible, riddled with bad luck and crashes. They did not finish out the 2001 season. Was a teammate to Ricky Craven, Scott Pruitt. No, Ricky Craven. I had it right the first time, because Scott Pruitt drove the 32 in 2000, then Craven drove it in 2001. But anyway, got released from that ride after not quite a year. Went back down to the trucks. Here he is driving for Billy Ballew's number 15. And then he would go over to that number 2 truck that literally everybody that's ran more than 20 truck races, it seems like, has run that 2 truck for Jimmy Smith. And then, I can't remember if he had a win in this truck or not. Everybody seemed to win in it, but I'm not seeing any stats here that would suggest otherwise. I think Andy was a competent driver. He just always was a victim of wrong place, wrong time type of thing. So, there's our birthdays and events for today. Hope you enjoyed the video. Anyway, thanks again for watching. Really, really do appreciate it. Like I mentioned this morning, make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and we will see you tomorrow.